If you're thinking about buying an electric car in California, I want you to know that I already made that mistake. I bought a non-Tesla EV and drove it around California, taking multiple road trips to visit family, and I regretted having the EV. And when I ran the numbers, which I'm going to share with you today, I discovered that having an EV and having to charge it at DC fast charging stations and having to manage peak rates and off-peak rates really made EV ownership not make a lot of sense. The lack of availability of EV charging stations, as well as the costs, which we're going to focus on today, really made owning a non-Tesla EV not make any sense. So today I'm going to take you through a couple scenarios so you can see the actual numbers and how it works out when you compare just filling up a car with gas versus charging up an EV at home and also at DC fast charging stations. So let's get into it. All right, so let's take a look at some scenarios here. If you're in California, average price per gas as I'm filming is $4.65 a gallon. I'm comparing a car, a hybrid that gets about 45 miles per gallon to an EV, and I'm going to assume that it gets 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which we're going to talk about in a second, and then we need to enter in the kilowatt per hour rate. So how much do you pay to PG&E? If you're on the EV rate in my area and you're getting off-peak charging only for your car, which means from midnight to 3 p.m., then that's going to cost about 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So when we compare all of that math, we find out that, hey, there's a $478 per year savings driving that EV, which is not that much, and depending on how much it costs to buy the EV versus the hybrid, you might not really see significant savings. Now, let's look at another scenario. Let's say you actually need to charge while you're on a road trip. Well, there was a time where that might cost you only 34 cents if you had the Electrify America Pass plan and you're paying their monthly fee because you knew you were going to be using their fast charging stations all the time. Well, in that case, at 34 cents per kilowatt hour, you're saving a tiny bit, right, over the course of the year. Now, obviously, you're not going to be driving all 15,000 miles a year with that fast charging rate, because you'd also be killing your battery, and that's a whole other can of worms you want to get into. But just consider that if you are paying 34 cents a kilowatt hour, you're already at basically even with just paying for gas. So any road trip that you're doing with an EV already costs you as much as if you're paying for gas. In 2023, Electrify America is raising the rate to 36 cents per kilowatt hour, even if you're paying their $4 monthly fee. So, hey, you actually now save nothing. It's actually zero savings if you have to use DC fast charging with your EV. I want you to understand that very clearly. If you are charging on a road trip, you are paying just as much as if you were paying for gas. But wait, it gets better, because if you don't have the Electrify America monthly plan, you're not paying them your monthly fee, then guess what? The standard rate is actually 48 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you plug that in to our little calculator, you are actually paying more to charge with electricity quickly when you're on a road trip by a lot. So now you are effectively paying more than what it costs to fill up with gas. And guess what? 48 cents is not that far off from the PG&E peak rate. So let's say you have to charge at home during peak hours so you can get somewhere, and you're, say, paying 45 cents per kilowatt hour for the electricity to charge your car at home. Well, guess what? You're still paying more than it costs to just put gas into a hybrid. More and more people get EVs. Is PG&E going to be nice and continue to offer this big off-peak discount? Because everybody's going to be charging their cars, which is going to be a lot of electricity being drawn overnight. And now I want to return to the miles per kilowatt hour for the EV. I said 3.5, and that's what I was getting during the warmer months with the EV that I had. But once it got cold in the winter and it dropped below 55 or 50 degrees, then I was only seeing around 3 miles per kilowatt hour. And what does that do to the equation? Well, it guarantees that I'm still not really doing better than gas. Now, even at the off-peak rate, I am saving a little bit, but it's not that much. certainly not enough to offset the added purchase cost of an EV versus a comparable hybrid, and in my opinion, definitely not enough to offset the irritation and hassle of using Electrify America or EVgo. Now, I do want to point out that there could be situations where maybe this turns out a little bit better when you make the comparison. Maybe you're looking at a larger SUV, and maybe you're looking at like the Model Y, in which case, if you're trying to get a bigger SUV, you're probably not going to find a gas-powered hybrid that gets great mileage. Maybe you're going to get 33 miles per gallon if you're lucky. And in that case, you might see that you have more cost savings by driving an EV, depending on what kind of efficiency you get out of the EV and what your per kilowatt hour rate is. But again, you want to consider what you're going to be paying on road trips if you take road trips. And again, if you take road trips, things are going to look a little bit closer. And that's, of course, assuming that you have the Electrify America plan or an EVgo plan to get the discounted rate. Otherwise, if you're paying these more exorbitant rates in the 40 cents area, you're still not going to be saving any money by charging with your EV. I guess maybe if we fool with this and give you higher efficiency, then we can squeak out a couple $100 a month in savings. But keep in mind that the purchase price for a Model Y versus a gas-powered hybrid SUV, they're probably not going to be all that comparable. If you save $300 a year, you're not going to make up for a $20,000 difference in purchase price. Now, one thing I want to point out is that some of these numbers might make better sense in another state where your electricity rates are cheaper. Let's say, for example, you live in a state like Arkansas where maybe you're paying 9 cents a kilowatt hour. And let's just check to see what your gas prices are like, $3.08. So if we plug that in, $3.08, we assume you got a 45 mile per gallon vehicle again, go down to that 3.5 again, and let's say you're paying 9 cents per kilowatt hour. Well, in that case, if you're paying 9 cents per kilowatt hour for your electricity, then you're kind of making out like a bandit. Of course, this same chart is not really representative of California's rates because 19.65 cents actually seems pretty cheap to me. If you're living in a bigger city in California, you're probably not paying 20 cents per kilowatt hour, and you're definitely not paying that at peak hours. But then maybe in Arkansas, you're paying 19 cents instead of that 9 cents. Well, okay, things get a little bit closer here, and then you might want to run the math for yourself. I did see a comment from a previous video where somebody said they were paying 9 cents per kilowatt hour in Texas. So again, if you're actually getting 9 cents per kilowatt hour, that's pretty awesome. If your gas is $2.99, we can run the math here, punch that in and see, all right, well, versus a hybrid at 9 cents, you are saving a decent amount. But again, you want to think, are you actually saving much more to offset the purchase price of the EV? That's really going to depend on your state. That's going to depend on the price at purchase time. It's going to depend on what tax incentives are available. Of course, if your number one priority is that your car does not give off fumes and that it runs on electricity and doesn't run on fossil fuels, then an EV does make some sense. Even though, yes, it may be using electricity from coal, it's still not using as much fossil fuels due to the inefficiency of gas and oil transport, refinement, and actually transporting to the gas station and all that stuff. The main point I want to drive home here, especially for Californians, is the cost of fueling with gas and the cost of fueling your EV at either peak times or when you're fast charging are pretty much the same and sometimes actually favor gas. Of course, a big thing to point out here is if you are always paying the cheaper non-peak rate to charge your car and you're not taking your EV on road trips, then yeah, you will save some money with your EV fueling costs. But when you're running all those numbers, make sure you also factor in the cost of buying a home charger for your vehicle and also retrofitting your circuitry in your garage or in your house so that you can actually charge at level 2 charging so that your car doesn't take 6 days to charge. I'm just kidding, it's not usually 6 days. It might be like 3 or 4 days if you're charging at 110 volts. I'm going to leave a link to this website so you can run the calculations for yourself, and drop me a comment and let me know what happens when you run the comparisons between a gas-powered car and an electric car that you're considering. What happens when you factor in these different fuel and electricity costs? Make sure to let me know what cars you are running the comparison on so that other people can see that in the future. All right, that's it for this video. Remember to keep it simple.